My mom once asked me a question that still echoes in my head. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and said, "Why did you walk away from your family?" What she never asked was why she let my brother take my life first. Not my money, not my house, my life, my future, my name, my place in that family. And the hardest part, she didn't do it by accident. She watched it happen. She helped it happen. And then she acted surprised when I finally disappeared. For years, my brother was the one everyone worried about, the one who needed more support, the one who could do no wrong. And I was the one who was told to wait, to be patient, to be understanding, to be strong. I believed her until the day I realized my mother didn't just favor my brother. She chose him. She chose him when a door opened for me. She chose him when my future was finally within reach. And she chose him again when I came to her broken, asking for the truth. She told herself it was for the good of the family. But here's the part no one warned me about. When a parent lets one child take everything, they don't just destroy the child who loses. They also build a lie that eventually collapses on everyone. If you've ever been the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace, if you've ever been told to forgive while you were still bleeding, if you've ever walked away and were made to feel guilty for surviving, this story is for you. And before we go any further, if stories about family betrayal, quiet sacrifices, and the moment karma finally shows up speak to you, take a second to subscribe to Revenge Water Story. That way, even if life pulls you away, you won't miss the stories that remind you you're not alone. Because what happened after I left, what happened to my brother, and the truth my mother was forced to face, that's the part she never expected. And by the end of this story, you might understand why walking away was the only choice I had left. I grew up in a house where nothing was ever said out loud, but everything was understood. My brother was the center of that house, not because he asked for it, because my mother built the world around him that way. From the time we were kids, she called him sensitive. She said he felt things more deeply, that life was harder for him. So when he cried, everything stopped. When he failed, excuses were made. When he lashed out, someone else took the blame. Most of the time that someone was me. I was the quiet one, the easy child, the one my mother liked to describe as independent, mature, strong. At first, I thought it was a compliment. When my brother forgot his homework, I was told not to tease him. When he broke something that belonged to me, I was told to share. When he lost control, I was told to understand. "You know how he is," my mother would say. "You're better at handling things." What she really meant was this: I was better at being ignored. Birthdays were small lessons. His were planned weeks in advance. Mine were last-minute dinners or a card signed in a hurry. If I ever looked disappointed, my mother would sigh and say, "You don't need all that attention." And I believed her. I learned early not to ask for much, not to take up space, not to need. When relatives came over, my brother's achievements were shared proudly. His struggles were explained carefully. Mine were barely mentioned. If I brought up a good grade or a small win, my mother would smile, distracted, and say, "That's nice, honey." Then she would turn back to my brother. As kids, we don't question these things. We adapt. I told myself I didn't need praise, that I didn't care, that being overlooked was better than being a burden. But something shifts when you start to notice patterns. I noticed how my brother was comforted when he failed, while I was corrected when I struggled. I noticed how my mistakes were treated as flaws, while his were treated as phases. And I noticed how my mother always seemed tired when dealing with me, but endlessly patient with him. Still, I stayed quiet, because silence kept the peace. My father was there, but distant. He worked long hours. He didn't ask questions. And my mother controlled the emotional weather of the house. If she was calm, everyone survived the day. If she was upset, the house felt heavy. So I learned another lesson. Don't upset Mom. That meant agreeing even when something felt unfair. That meant apologizing even when I hadn't done anything wrong. That meant shrinking myself just enough so things wouldn't fall apart. Looking back now, I can see it clearly. My mother didn't just favor my brother. She assigned roles. He was the one who needed saving, and I was the one who could be sacrificed. But back then, I didn't have those words. I just knew that no matter how hard I tried, no matter how responsible I was, no matter how little I asked for, I was always second. And when you grow up being second, you start believing that's where you belong. You tell yourself that love doesn't have to be equal, that families aren't perfect, that someday it will balance out. I truly believe that. I believe that if I kept my head down and did everything right, my mother would eventually see me. I didn't know yet that she already saw me and that she had already decided who mattered more. What I didn't understand then was that this imbalance wasn't just shaping my childhood. It was quietly setting the stage for the moment my brother wouldn't just take attention from me. He would take my future. The first real door that ever opened for me didn't come from my family. It came from my own effort. By the time I finished school, I had learned how to survive quietly. I worked part-time. I stayed late. I didn't ask for help. While my brother drifted from one idea to the next, I focused on one thing: getting out. There was a program, nothing glamorous, but it meant training stability and a real chance to build something on my own. I filled out the application late at night, sitting at the kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed. I double-checked every line. I rewrote the personal statement 3 times. I didn't tell anyone at first, not because I didn't want to share, but because I was afraid of what might happen if I did. When the email came, I stared at the screen for a long time. I had been accepted, not waitlisted, not considered, accepted. For the first time in my life, I felt something shift inside me. Hope. I told my mother the next morning. She smiled. She hugged me. But there was something else in her eyes. Not pride, not excitement, calculation. She asked questions that felt off. How long is the program? Is it competitive? Do they take many people? Then she said something that stuck with me. Your brother could really use something like this. At first, I laughed it off. I told myself she was just thinking out loud. But over the next few days, the comments didn't stop. She started comparing us, talking about how lost he was, how discouraged he felt. He's been having such a hard time, she said one evening. This could really help him. I reminded her that I had already been accepted. She nodded, but she didn't agree. Instead, she said, "You've always been able to land on your feet." That sentence followed me everywhere. At dinner, in the car, in quiet moments when I thought the conversation was over. She wasn't asking me to give it up. Not directly. She was planting the idea that I didn't really need it. A week later, she asked for the acceptance email. She said she just wanted to read it, to understand the program better. I hesitated. Then I handed her my phone. That night, I watched her type an email at the kitchen table. She told me it was nothing important, just a few questions. A few days passed. Then an email came, but it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my brother. It congratulated him on moving forward in the selection process. I remember staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. There had to be a mistake. When I asked my mother, she didn't panic. She didn't look surprised. She sighed, and then she said it. I explained the situation to them. I asked her what she meant. She told me she thought it would be better if my brother took the spot, that he needed structure more than I did, that I was strong enough to figure something else out. I reminded her it was my acceptance. She looked at me like I was being unreasonable. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. "This is what's best for the family." That was the first time I felt something break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet crack. My brother didn't say a word. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask if I was okay. He accepted the congratulations. He accepted the opportunity. And I stood there, realizing something that would take me years to fully understand. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. My mother hadn't taken my future by mistake. She had made a choice, and she had expected me to accept it, the way I always had. What I didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning. Because once someone learns they can take something from you without consequences, they don't stop. After that, things moved fast. Too fast for me to catch my breath. My brother stepped into the program like it had always been meant for him. New routine, new confidence, new stories to tell at the dinner table. And suddenly, everything in the house revolved around his progress. My mother asked him how his day went. She listened closely. She offered advice. When he complained, she reassured him. When he doubted himself, she lifted him up. I sat at the same table, listening to details about a life that should have been mine. At first, I tried to stay detached. I told myself I could still find another path, that this one opportunity didn't define me. But the truth was harder to ignore. He was learning the skills I had studied for. He was meeting people I had dreamed of working with. He was being praised for things I had already proven I could do. And every time I felt that sting, my mother reminded me, "You're happy for your brother, right?" It wasn't a question. It was a test. If I hesitated, she would frown. If I stayed quiet, she would accuse me of being jealous. So I nodded. I smiled. I congratulated him. Inside, something kept sinking. Then came the introductions. Family friends, distant relatives, people from the community. My brother would explain what he was doing now, and my mother would beam with pride. She would say things like, "He finally found his path." Sometimes she would even say, "He's always been good at this." I wanted to speak up. I wanted to say, that was me. That was my plan. Those were my dreams. But the words stayed stuck in my throat because I could already hear her response. "Don't make this about you." So I watched him step further into a future that felt stolen. What hurt the most wasn't just the opportunity itself. It was how easily everyone accepted the story my mother told. No one asked why I wasn't there. No one wondered why the roles had suddenly switched. They saw a confident son moving forward and a quiet sibling standing in the background. And they assumed that was how it was supposed to be. One night, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. My brother was talking to a friend on the phone. He laughed and said, "Yeah, Mom pulled some strings. It worked out. Pulled some strings. Not helped me, not supported me. Pulled some strings." In that moment, it became painfully clear. He knew. He knew the spot hadn't been meant for him. He knew it had been mine. And he didn't care. He didn't question it. He didn't refuse it. He didn't even feel conflicted. He felt entitled, because that's what happens when someone grows up being chosen. They stop wondering who pays the price. From that point on, something shifted in how he treated me. He became dismissive, smug. If I struggled with work or money, he offered advice he had no right to give. Advice built on an opportunity he never earned. My mother watched these interactions and said nothing. Sometimes she even smiled, as if seeing him rise and me fade into the background confirmed something for her, that this had been the right decision. I started working longer hours at a job that barely paid the bills. I came home exhausted, mentally and physically, and still I was expected to be supportive, to celebrate his milestones, to pretend none of this hurt. The house felt smaller, heavier. Every day, I felt myself disappearing a little more, not because I was failing, but because the space where I was supposed to grow had been handed to someone else. That was when I finally understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. My brother hadn't just taken an opportunity. He had stepped into my life, and my mother had held the door open for him. I didn't confront my mother right away, not because I wasn't angry, but because I was afraid of what she might say. There's a certain kind of fear that comes from knowing the truth might hurt more than the silence. I waited until the house was quiet. My brother was out. The TV was off. It was just the two of us in the kitchen. I asked her if we could talk. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look guilty. She looked tired. I told her I knew what she had done, that I knew the opportunity had been mine, that I knew she had stepped in and redirected it. I expected denial, excuses, maybe even anger. What I didn't expect was how calmly she admitted it. She nodded slowly and said, "Yes, I did." Just like that. No apology, no hesitation. She said she had thought about it carefully, that she had weighed the options, that she believed my brother needed it more. I asked her why she hadn't talked to me first. She said she didn't think I would understand. That answer hurt more than anything else. I asked her if she realized what she had taken from me. She looked at me quiet for a moment, then said, "You'll be fine. You always are." That sentence felt like a final verdict. I told her I had worked for that chance, that I had earned it. She shook her head gently, like I was a child misunderstanding the situation. "You're strong," she said. "Your brother isn't." I asked her if strength meant being disposable. She sighed and said something that still stays with me. In every family, someone has to be the stable one. I realized then that she had a story she told herself, a story where her actions were not cruel but necessary. In her version, she wasn't choosing favorites. She was managing resources, and I was the resource she felt she could afford to lose. I asked her if she would have done the same thing if our roles were reversed, if I had been the one struggling and he had been the one accepted. She didn't answer right away. She looked down at the table. She folded her hands. Then she said, "No." The room felt very still. I asked her why. She looked up at me and said, "Because he wouldn't survive it." There it was, the truth I had been circling for years. She believed I could handle loss, and she believed my brother could not. And so without ever asking me, without ever considering the cost, she decided I would be the one to give up everything. I asked her if she understood how that made me feel. She said she was sorry I felt hurt, not sorry she had done it. Sorry I was reacting this way. Then she said the sentence that ended the conversation. "If I had to choose again," she said quietly, "I would still choose him." She didn't say it to be cruel. She said it like a fact, like gravity, like something that simply was. I stood there listening to my mother explain why my pain was acceptable, why my future was negotiable, why my life could be redirected without my consent. And in that moment, something inside me went very calm. I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining, because I finally understood something important. I wasn't trying to convince her. I was trying to be seen, and she had already decided not to look. I left the kitchen that night, knowing one thing for sure. This wasn't a misunderstanding that could be fixed. This was a choice that had been made and would be made again. What I didn't know yet was how much damage that choice would cause, not just to me, but to everyone she thought she was protecting. After that conversation, nothing exploded. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic scenes. Life just continued, and that somehow made it worse. My mother went back to her routines. My brother kept moving forward, and I was expected to do the same. But something in me had shifted. I started waking up already tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, the kind that settles in your chest and doesn't leave. I went to work. I did what I had to do. I smiled when people talked to me. But inside, everything felt heavy. I kept replaying my mother's words in my head. "You'll be fine. In every family, someone has to be the stable one." I would still choose him. I didn't realize how much I had been holding myself together until I stopped being able to. I began missing small things. Deadlines, appointments, conversations I used to manage easily. When I came home, the house didn't feel like a place to rest. It felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. My brother would talk about his plans, his goals, his next steps. My mother listened with the same focus she always had. No one asked how I was doing, and when they did, it wasn't a real question. "You okay, fine?" That was the expected answer. I tried to explain once, just once. I told my mother I was struggling, that I felt stuck, that I didn't know where I was going anymore. She looked uncomfortable. She glanced at the clock. Then she said, "You need to stop dwelling on the past." I asked her how I was supposed to move on when the past was still shaping my present. She told me I was being dramatic. That word hit harder than she knew. Dramatic. As if my pain was a performance. As if the loss of my future was something I was exaggerating. After that, I stopped trying to explain. Because every time I did, the message came back the same. My feelings were the problem, not what had been done to me. My brother noticed the change in me. He commented on my mood, on my attitude. Once during dinner, he said, "You really need to let this go." I looked at him and realized something. He wasn't uncomfortable because he felt guilty. He was uncomfortable because my pain interrupted his comfort. And my mother agreed with him. She said the tension in the house was exhausting, that everyone needed peace. Peace, not truth, not accountability. Peace, which meant I was expected to swallow everything so things could feel normal again. I started isolating myself. I spent more time in my room, more time outside the house, anywhere that didn't remind me of what I had become inside those walls. At night, I lay awake wondering how it had come to this, how doing everything right had still led me here. I wasn't angry all the time. Mostly I was numb enough to stop dreaming, numb enough to stop planning. I felt like I was watching my life happen from a distance. And slowly, without anyone noticing, I began to disappear. The final straw came quietly. One evening, my mother told me she was worried about my brother. She said the pressure on him was intense, that he needed support. She asked me to be patient with him. In that moment, something inside me gave way. I realized that no matter how far I fell, no matter how much I struggled, there would always be more concern for him than for me. I wasn't just overlooked. I was expendable. That night, I sat alone and asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What would happen if I stayed? And the answer scared me more than leaving ever could. If I stayed, I would keep shrinking. I would keep giving. I would keep losing pieces of myself until there was nothing left to protect. That was when I understood something clearly for the first time. Walking away wasn't selfish. Staying was killing me. I didn't announce that I was leaving. There was no argument, no goodbye speech, no final attempt to be understood. I just stopped being there. One morning, I packed a small bag. Nothing dramatic, just the things I needed. Clothes, documents, a few personal items that reminded me who I was before everything became so heavy. I left a short note on the kitchen counter. "I need space. Please don't look for me." That was it. Not because I didn't have more to say, but because I had already said everything that mattered. I walked out of the house without looking back. And for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected. Relief. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was the absence of pressure. The absence of having to explain myself. I stayed with a friend at first. Someone who didn't ask too many questions. I took whatever work I could find. Long hours, low pay. But every night when I closed the door behind me, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy. It was calm. For weeks, I didn't answer my phone. There were messages, missed calls. At first, they were confused. "Where are you? What's going on?" Then they turned irritated. "This is immature. You're causing unnecessary stress." And finally, they turned concerned. "Your mother sounds worried. Your brother is asking about you." That part almost pulled me back. Almost. But then I remembered how worried they had been when I was still there. I remembered how invisible I felt. So I stayed gone. Slowly, I started rebuilding things I didn't even realize I had lost. My appetite came back. My sleep improved. I started making small plans again. Nothing big, just next week, next month. For the first time, my life felt like it belonged to me. Back home, things were changing. I heard about it through bits and pieces. My brother struggled without constant support. Deadlines slipped. Conflicts followed him. My mother tried to step in the way she always had, but it was harder now. I wasn't there to absorb the tension, to smooth things over, to make sacrifices quietly. The house felt different without me, unbalanced. And that was something no one had prepared for. My mother left voicemails saying she didn't understand. Why would you do this? We're a family. I listened to them once. Then I stopped, because for the first time, I understood something clearly. Family isn't defined by how much you endure. It's defined by how much you're allowed to exist. Weeks turned into months. People stopped asking when I was coming back. They started asking if I was okay. And that question felt strange, because no one had asked it when I needed it most. I didn't heal all at once. There were days I felt guilty, days I doubted myself, days I wondered if I had overreacted. But then, I would remember the kitchen conversation, the calm certainty in my mother's voice. I would still choose him, and the doubt would fade. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was choosing myself for the first time. I learned something important during that period. When you remove yourself from a system that depends on your silence, the system starts to crack. Problems that were once hidden surface quickly, and people who were comfortable start asking questions. Not about what they did, but about why you're no longer there to make it easier. I didn't know yet how far those cracks would spread. I didn't know what would happen to my brother, or how my mother would handle losing control. All I knew was this: I was finally breathing, and whatever came next, I would face it from a place of strength, not survival. I didn't hear about my brother's downfall all at once. It came in pieces, through people who didn't realize they were delivering something heavier than news. At first it sounded small. He was behind at work, missed a few deadlines, had trouble adjusting. Nothing serious, my mother said. Everyone struggles at first. But the tone of her messages changed over time. The confidence disappeared. The excuses multiplied. Then the problem stopped sounding temporary. My brother started clashing with supervisors. People complained about his attitude. He blamed pressure, bad timing, other people, the same way he always had. Only this time, there was no one stepping in quietly behind the scenes. I wasn't there to absorb the tension, to smooth over conflicts, to make things easier for everyone. And my mother was discovering something she had never had to face before. Supporting my brother without sacrificing me was much harder than she expected. She tried to fix things. She called. She emailed. She showed up where she could. But her influence didn't stretch as far anymore. And my brother began to unravel. He grew defensive, then resentful. He started lashing out at the people around him. Friends pulled away. Opportunities dried up. The same confidence that had been praised when things were going well turned into arrogance when they weren't. At home, the atmosphere shifted. Without me there, the imbalance became impossible to ignore. Arguments lasted longer. Silences felt heavier. My mother grew tired, really tired. Not the kind of tired she could explain away. The kind that comes from holding a structure together with nothing solid underneath it. She stopped talking about my brother's future and started talking about his mistakes. Quietly at first, then out loud. One evening, she left me a voicemail. Her voice was tight. "He's not doing well," she said. "I don't know what to do anymore." I listened without reacting, because this was the moment I had always known would come. When the person who was protected from consequences finally had to face them. My brother lost the position that had once been celebrated. Not all at once. Gradually, responsibilities taken away, trust reduced. Then finally, the end, he came home angry, embarrassed, blaming everyone but himself. And my mother tried to comfort him the only way she knew how. By fixing, by explaining, by softening the truth. But something had changed. She was no longer confident that she was doing the right thing. I could hear it in her voice when she called. She asked questions now. Questions she had never asked before. "Do you think he's overwhelmed? Do you think we pushed him too hard?" She never asked what she had taken from me, but she was beginning to see what she had built. A future held together by favors, a sense of entitlement mistaken for ability. And without constant protection, it collapsed. My brother started asking about me. At first it sounded casual. "Have you heard from them? Then it became pointed. Why won't they answer? He wanted advice, support, something he had never offered me. And my mother, for the first time, didn't know how to give him what he wanted, because the person who had quietly held everything together was no longer there. The house felt hollow, not because I was gone, but because the role I had played was finally visible by its absence. I didn't feel satisfied hearing all this. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt sad. Sad that it had taken so much damage for the truth to surface. Sad that the cost had been paid by all of us. But I also felt something else. Clarity. Karma hadn't come in a dramatic crash. It came slowly, through patterns repeating themselves, without someone there to clean up the mess. And my mother was starting to understand something painful. The child she had believed needed saving had never learned how to stand. And the one she had sacrificed had been the reason the family held together at all. She didn't find me right away. For a long time, my mother only left messages, voicemails that started formal, then cautious, then emotional. I just want to talk. I don't understand what happened. I'm worried about you. She never said she was sorry. Not once. Eventually, she showed up. I wasn't expecting her that day. I opened the door and saw her standing there, older than I remembered. Her shoulders looked heavier, her eyes tired. She smiled like she was relieved, like finding me had been the hard part. We sat across from each other in a quiet space that didn't belong to either of us. She looked around, taking in my life. Small, simple, mine. She asked how I'd been. I told her the truth, that I was doing better. She nodded like that surprised her. Then she asked the question, the one she had been holding on to for months. Why did you walk away? There it was. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Why did you leave us? I didn't answer right away. I studied her face. She looked genuinely confused, as if my absence was something that had happened to her, not something she had helped cause. I asked her if she really didn't know. She said she had tried everything, that she had done her best. She said families make sacrifices, that sometimes people get hurt unintentionally. Unintentionally. I reminded her of the kitchen conversation, of what she had said, of the choice she had admitted to making. She looked uncomfortable. She said she hadn't meant it the way I took it, that she was under pressure, that she was afraid for my brother. Then she said something that explained everything. I didn't think you would actually leave. She thought I would bend, adjust, stay, because I always had. I told her that walking away wasn't sudden, that it was the result of years of being told I mattered less. She listened, but I could tell something important. She wasn't listening to understand. She was listening to respond. She talked about how things had fallen apart after I left, how my brother struggled, how exhausted she felt. She said the family wasn't the same without me, and for a moment, I almost believed she missed me. Then she said it. I just don't know how to hold everything together without you. That was the truth. Not love, not regret, need. She needed the version of me that absorbed pain quietly, the one who fixed things by disappearing. I asked her if she would do things differently now. She hesitated. Then she said she wished things had turned out better. Not that she would choose differently. Not that she would protect me. Just that the outcome hadn't been so messy. I realized then that she wasn't here to repair the past. She was here to restore the balance that had benefited her. She asked if I would come back, if we could try again. I felt calm answering her. I told her I couldn't, not because I hated her, not because I wanted revenge, but because I had finally learned what staying cost me. She looked hurt. She said she didn't raise me to abandon family. I told her she raised me to survive being abandoned. That silence filled the space between us. She asked what she could do now. And that was the moment I understood something deeply. She was too late. Not because forgiveness was impossible, but because change requires awareness. And she still didn't see me as someone who had been wronged. She saw me as someone who had left. We stood up. She hugged me awkwardly, like someone hugging a stranger. As she walked away, she said something quietly. I hope one day you understand. I watched her leave and thought about that sentence. Because for the first time in my life, I finally did. I didn't plan to see them again. Not after that meeting with my mother. But life has a way of bringing things back around when you're finally strong enough to face them. It was my brother who reached out. Not with anger, not with arrogance, with uncertainty. He asked if we could talk. Just once. I agreed, not because I owed him anything, but because I no longer needed anything from him. We met somewhere neutral. No childhood memories, no emotional territory. Just two adults sitting across from each other. He looked different, quieter, smaller. The confidence he once wore so easily was gone. He didn't start with an apology. He started with frustration. He talked about how everything had fallen apart, how nothing worked the way he thought it would, how he felt lost. I listened. Then he said something that surprised me. "I don't know how you walked away." I told him the truth. I didn't walk away because I was strong. I walked away because staying was destroying me. He asked if I blamed him. That question hung between us. I thought about all the times he had accepted what wasn't his, all the moments he had looked the other way, and I realized something important. Blame wasn't going to give me peace. I told him he had benefited from choices that hurt me, that he had known, and that he had stayed silent. He didn't argue. He looked down and said, "I thought that's just how things were." That sentence explained more than he realized. When someone grows up being favored, they don't see the system as unfair. They see it as normal. I told him that normal for him had cost me years of my life. He nodded, and for the first time, I saw something real on his face. Regret. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet and heavy. He said he wished he could change things. I told him I didn't need him to, because I had already changed them myself. We talked about our mother, about how much she had controlled the family dynamic, about how both of us had been shaped by it, just in very different ways. I told him something I had never said out loud before, that I didn't hate him, but I also didn't trust him. And trust isn't rebuilt through words. It's rebuilt through consistent change. He asked if I would ever come back. I told him no, not to the family structure we grew up in, not to the roles that had been assigned to us. I told him I hoped he would learn how to stand on his own, without someone clearing the path, without someone else paying the price. We stood up to leave. He thanked me for meeting him, and for the first time, that thank you didn't feel hollow. Later, my mother called. She said she heard we had talked. She asked how it went. I told her it was honest. She asked if that meant things could go back to normal. That word again, normal. I told her no. I told her something she had never been willing to hear, that forgiveness doesn't mean access, that understanding doesn't mean returning, and that walking away wasn't something I did to her. It was something I did for myself. She was quiet. Then she said she hoped I had found peace. I told her I had, but not because things were fixed, because I finally stopped trying to fix everyone else. That was the last conversation we had, not because there was nothing left to say, but because everything that mattered had finally been said. I didn't leave that family angry. I left clear about who I was, clear about what I deserved, and clear about one truth I wish more people understood. You can love your family and still choose to walk away. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop living a life someone else chose for you. As someone who has spent years listening to family stories like this one, I can tell you something many people are afraid to admit. Not all family wounds come from cruelty. Some come from choices made, calmly, repeated quietly, and justified as love. In families where one child is protected at all costs, another often learns how to disappear. They become the stable one, the understanding one, the strong one. And strength, when misunderstood, becomes permission. Permission to overlook, permission to sacrifice, permission to take without asking. What happened in this story is not rare. Parents don't always intend to harm one child for another, but intention doesn't erase impact. When a child is taught that their needs matter less, they don't just lose opportunities. They lose their sense of worth. Walking away in these cases is not abandonment. It is self-preservation. And forgiveness, despite what we are often told, does not require returning to the same place that caused the pain. Healing begins when we stop asking, "How do I make them understand me?" and start asking, "What do I need to finally feel whole?" If this story stirred something in you, if you recognized yourself in the quiet sacrifices, the guilt for choosing yourself, or the relief that comes with finally stepping away, know this: you are not weak for leaving. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. And you are not broken for needing distance. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to keep playing a role that costs you your life. And if stories like this help you reflect, feel seen, or begin your own healing, I invite you to support this channel by liking this video and subscribing to Revenge Water Story. We share these stories not to create anger, but to bring awareness, understanding, and strength to those who have lived quietly for too long. Before you go, take a moment to ask yourself this: if no one ever changed, if nothing ever improved, would staying still be worth the price you're paying? Sometimes the answer to healing isn't louder words or bigger sacrifices. It's the courage to walk away and finally choose yourself. Thank you for listening.